We've all been talking about Marathon for months at this point. It is a game that seemed like it was never going to release after the multiple controversies and delays, but now that it is finally here, it's not doing as great as Bungie probably expected. Its all-time peak on Steam was 88,000 over the weekend, and it hasn't started to go back up past the Saturday and Sunday rush, we'll call it. But to top all of that off, the Access Media is trying to compare this game to other live service titles and say that it's doing so good, even though they're actually proving our point that it's not. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, it's pretty obvious that Marathon did sell at least 1 million copies between the multiple consoles and PC and just platforms in general that it is actually sold on, but it has been estimated that they need to sell upwards of 7 million copies in order to start making a profit on this game, because you have to consider that this is a game that is $40 at release, so that means that they need to make almost double the amount of money that they would if it was a $70 game. But to top all of that off, it is a title that is a live service, so they need those players to not only buy the game, but consistently play the game, spend funds on microtransactions, come back for new content updates. They need the player base to hold steady, and so far it has done that in a way, right? It hasn't gotten past its all-time peak of 88,337 on Steam, but every day it was going up to like 78, 75, 77. Though now that we are past the weekend rush and we'll just say it's sort of died down in terms of the amount of hype because people have actually played it, on Monday in the afternoon, it's peaked so far at 39,601, which is really bad. Like, that is not a good look. And sure, maybe it will go up to 60,000, but it's very clear that this game is not going to top 100,000 players at this point in time. And now the Access Media is actually trying to damage control. They're saying, forget Slay the Spire, let's compare Marathon's opening weekend to other live service games. But what is so funny about the situation is that they only compare it, really, to another game, which is Arc Raiders. And then they do briefly talk about Highguard, but that's it. And what's hilarious about this is that they're really proving our point that this game hasn't done as good as Bungie was probably expecting. I love when the Access Media tries to damage control and they do a terrible job. Like, if you're going to go into an article and say, we're going to compare Marathon's numbers with other live service games, use more than 2 examples? Like, it's really not that hard to do, especially given The Gamer has put up articles in the past listing off like 20 live service games and their player counts. But before we get into that, it says Marathon peaked at a little more than 88k players on Steam when it launched last week, according to SteamDB. That number dropped by about 10k for its weekend peak, and while Bungie likely hoped that that peak for Marathon's opening weekend would be higher than the number it hit when it launched on Thursday, there are positives to be drawn from its weekend numbers when comparing it to some other recent live service hits. Highguard actually debuted with more than 97,000 concurrent players on Steam at launch. Within 24 hours, more than half of those players had left, and by its first week, only 15k had stuck around. Sure, Bungie will have wanted Marathon's launch numbers to be higher, but hey, it kept 78k, and this is so pathetic. You are so desperate to defend this game that you're going, well, it's doing better than Highguard overall. Holy moly, you guys are absolute clowns. Then they say the Steam numbers can go up as well as down. Just look at Arc Raiders. And they talk about how 354,000 of you checked out Arc Raiders right away, but that number wound up being pretty low compared to what it would actually achieve. The weekend after Arc Raiders opening Gambit, the number had risen to 462,000. 7 days later, another 20k player jumped on the bandwagon. Those numbers haven't dissipated much either, as Arc Raiders surpassed a concurrent player count of 400k on 4 other weekends weekends. And so their conclusion is that, oh, Arc Raiders had insanely good numbers and then they dropped. But even if we take a look at Arc Raiders' numbers, they're still super solid. 235K 24-hour peak and 147K players right now. But again, it hit almost 500K peak, and the owner estimations are nearly 10 million. Marathons say that at the highest it's 664K and at the lowest it's 392. And that's why I said if you take into consideration the console numbers, it's probably at over a million copies sold, maybe like 1.5, but that's still nowhere close to being the numbers they probably expected. Over 300 estimated employees worked on Marathon. So you combine that with the fact that it probably had like a 200 to 300 million dollar budget, that's not a good look. And they even go on to cope and say, well, just because Marathon didn't hit 500,000 players on Steam at launch doesn't mean it's doomed out of the gate. 78,000 is more than 100 times more than Concord's peak. So at the very least, Marathon is safe from the PlayStation rug pull Firewalk's only game was subjected to. Oh my gosh, these people are so funny. And what is hilarious about this is, yes, they are writing this damage control article while ignoring a lot of other games' numbers. Let's just take a peek at something like Destiny 2, Bungie's last big hit. All-time peak was 316K on Steam, and it actually had its all-time peak in June 2024. So years after release. And even looking at what it's got in game right now, its 24-hour peak is 11K, which, yes, is not a lot at this point, but that's because they've wound down development. A lot of people are just still playing it a bit because they enjoy it. Like, Destiny 2 is at the end of its lifespan, and it did have a pretty solid all-time peak. Helldivers 2. It had an all-time peak of 458,709, and the 24-hour peak is 70K, which is rivaling Bungie's Marathon. And let's take another look at another live service game. Apex Legends, 624,000 all-time peak 3 years ago. 24-hour peak is 212K, and in-game right now is 96,547, so significantly more than Marathon has. And Highguard, man, oh man, the game that died in a month, 97,000 all-time peak. Now, with some of these games, it is a different situation. Yes, I will admit, because even though they are all live service games, they are free to play in the instance of Apex Legends and Highguard, even Destiny 2 now. But something like Helldivers also had an initial entry fee, right? So Marathon is not alone in the fact that, ooh, it cost $40. Arc Raiders also cost $40. You can get people in your game if you make a good game. It's just that simple. So I'm curious to see what the numbers will end up at, if Bungie will actually be pleased with what they have gotten out of Marathon so far, but it's very hard to imagine that that is actually the case given it didn't even top 100,000 weekend one on Steam. And I know some of my opinions on Marathon have upset some people online. Listen, if you like the game and you love it, I'm happy for you. I'm glad you don't feel like you got scammed. I'm glad you're getting your money's worth. I hope you play it for a long time. I hope you love it. I hope you enjoy it. But people are allowed to have other opinions, and clearly people have very strong opinions on Marathon simply because a lot of people are not playing it right now. So I will be keeping a close eye on this game and what's happening with the statistics and seeing how the media is going to continue to damage control. But a lot of other live service games that have initial entry fees have done significantly better, and I just think that this is a big dud for Bungie, and they clearly needed this to be a win, and so I feel like internally they might be going through some chaos. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.